So if you're making a calendar, right? I just grabbed one of the photos that I took when we were talking about abstract photography and macro photography. Brought it over here into this new document. If you go File, New, this is all I did, was my recommendation. You have all these other options up here like film, video, mobile, web. I would just go to print. If you want to photocopy, go to the photocopier and print your calendar pages eventually. 8.5 by 11 is pretty safe. 11 by 17, and these are all standard sizes you can take to Staples and get color prints of fairly inexpensively because they're not a custom size. So I just went tabloid, 11 by 17, and created that, and that was where that came from. And you can do whatever size and dimensions you want. Some quick tips in terms of laying things out. If you're kind of like a picky person and you're like, how on earth can I like lay things out a little bit better in Photoshop? There is a grid option, right? So you can go View, you can go down to Show, and you can show the grid. And then I find I don't typically use the grid a lot. The next thing I'm about to show you I use all the time, but some students really, if you're that type of person that likes plotting things out a bit better, the grid is super helpful. To get rid of that, you just go View, and you see that grid is check marked. If you just click it again, it will uncheck it and then get rid of the grid. What I use all the time when I'm designing a calendar or a book or something with that I want to like get like a bit more precise about is I want to show rulers. So you see how the rulers are check marked here, and then you will see the rulers up here. So if I click this and uncheck it, the rulers are gone. So I like using rulers and something called guides. So you can go rulers, the rulers pop up. You go here to the move tool. If you click and drag off of the ruler, these guides will appear. These are invisible lines. They don't print. If you save it as a JPEG, you won't see them. You'll only see these kind of bluish guidelines when you're in Photoshop using a Photoshop document. And then likewise, you can come over here. So you can use grids to kind of like lay things out if you want, or sorry, not grids. These guides, you can use these guides to kind of lay things out if you want. And then I create my own like kind of custom grid so I can keep everything along a certain line. To get rid of them, you just drag them off and wherever you want. Okay, so View, check mark rulers, go to your move tool, click off of the ruler, click and drag, and then you have guides to use to help lay your things out. I've already scaled that down and positioned it in size. So one of the popular things that students have done in the past is kind of like making things look like they're taped on spots or like little things in the corner. So I'm going to quickly demo something like that for you. So I'm going to go Command T, and I'm just going to rotate this to make it look a little bit like skewed. I'm going to drag these off to the side so they don't distract us. So if I was wanting to throw tape or something along the side, the quickest thing for me to demo is tape. I'd make a blank layer here. Then I would just go to my polygonal lasso tool, click, kind of click, and then drag a kind of like tape mark in spot there. And you can see that when I join it together, the dancing ants are created. Then I can go create the tape color that I think would look appropriate. I could go and then fill that in. And then Command D to deselect, and there's my piece of tape along the edge there. You can, if you wanted to, what's handy is just go down here, and you could throw a drop shadow on that if you wanted. I'm going to adjust the distance is way too much. You got to make it, if you're doing tape, it's like a little bit more subtle, obviously. Knock down the opacity, and then it'll look like the tape's kind of on top of it. And then, when you're ripping tape, you want like a rip mark. There's tons of ways to do this. The fastest way for you would be to go into the erase tool. You could erase the edge of it, make it look torn like that. You could also, if you want to extend what you can do, you could go down in here into the texture brushes, and you can actually erase. Oh, that's went to the brush. So if I go to the eraser, make sure I'm on the eraser, grab a texture. Hopefully that hasn't kicked. I kicked it over to the, okay. Always when I'm doing things live, man, so much fun. Now that went to the smudge. Okay, I don't know what's going on there. So if you want, for those of you that have been using masks, like you can get away with just erasing the edges like I showed. So if that's all you want to know, you can turn down your volume on me right now. But I'm gonna throw a mask on here. It's gonna be my workaround. So I throw a mask on there, go to my brush. For those of you that have watched my other tutorials, you'll see me using masks often. It's what I use like 98% of the time. I hardly ever use erase in my own practice, or the eraser in my own practice. So throw on a mask, go to the brush here, and then I should have access to these texture brushes, no problem. What on earth, man? This is so weird. Now it's like pumping me down into the smudge tool. This is driving me crazy. Hopefully you're mildly entertained at home. All right. Okay, there. I got the, it looks like I'm on the bro. Okay, so there you go. So you get the point, right? And if I zoom in there, I got this texture brush. So basically, you can throw a mask on. You should be able to use the erase and erase with a texture brush, or a mask with a texture brush. You don't just need a standard brush to do the edges. If you wanted to get a little bit more tricky and get in there, you can use a texture brush to save yourself some time. And then all I do for the tape is you can lower the opacity if you want. I think the tape looks a little bit better, kind of see-through. And then I would also warp the piece of tape a little bit. I think that all these like little attention to detail things make it look better. So if I go to edit, transform, the basic warp is right here. And then you can kind of like make it look a little more warpy if you need to. Makes it look a little bit more natural. So that's one way of warping it. If you've been watching my other tutorials, you'll see that there's this puppet warp thing in Photoshop. So you go to under edit, puppet warp, puts on this grid, and then you just go and you click little points, and then you can puppet warp that in place and hit enter. So now you have a piece of tape across it. So people like, if that's a graphic idea that you've had, that you want a little tab here in the corner, a little piece of tape, you can do that. So if you got the Polaroid look or old school album look, I'm just going to make a quick layer here. I'm going to put, so the old school album look sometimes has those like black tabs in the corner. I'm going to build one of those, turn this to black, go to my polygonal, go here, just kind of make like a tab there. I might not fill it in with complete black. I might fill it in with like a little bit of a charcoal gray. It gives me a little more flexibility with what I can do with different effects. So there's the tab there. Go down here into the effects or layer styles, and then I can go and check out bevel and emboss. And then you can bevel and you can throw a bevel and emboss on there, and that's where all that is. I'm not going to sit here and adjust that, but that's the information for you. So throwing a tab on, make a quick triangle or shape with your polygonal, fill it in with a charcoal color, because then your bevel and emboss, the shading will show up better. Go down here, bevel and emboss that. The tape layer, I just threw a subtle drop shadow on it, drop the opacity down, and erased or masked the edges to make it look like I tore the paper and then warped it. So those are two graphic kind of ideas for you when you're making your calendar page, right? The other thing is you've got a bunch of squares to be making down here. I'm going to start with a blank layer. A couple ways to do this. I can go to the rectangular tool. You hold the shift key down. It makes a perfect square. If you don't want it square, let go of the shift key and you make it rectangular. Then I can just fill this in with an arbitrary color, right? So I'm going to fill that in with the gray that I had. So this is the quickest way to do this. You've got your square there. If you're happy with that color, you could throw your information in there. You could even like lower the opacity a little bit, change the color quickly that way. And then down here in the layer styles or this effects button, you have a stroke that you can throw on. So strokes have been really popular. You can change the whatever color you want there. Just grab some of the red color from the photo. So let's get fall like, so adjust the size and go okay. So then if you don't want the inside color showing at all, what you can do is you can go over to the fill area and drop that to 0. And then basically the difference between fill and opacity is fill just knocks down the opacity of the inside of a stroke or the inside of a drop shadow, the inside area. Likewise, if you just want a little bit, you can put that at 24. I think that looks really nice. If you drop the whole opacity, it will affect the entire layer, the stroke and everything. So then I've made my little square there. And much similar to the book cover where I was doing the stripe pattern repeat, you don't have to keep doing this. You can make a copy, move that over. Just think about efficient ways of working. Shift select these things, make copies of those, shift those down. And then you're just working a little bit more efficiently in the program. Again, your layers are going to start increasing. So I'm going to shift select all of these layers, hit the group, pops it into a group. So they're all organized into a group for me. And there is one other trick I'm going to show you. So if you're thinking, wow, I would like these edges to be a little fancier, like I'd like them to be torn or like looking like a brush stroke, I'm going to make a blank layer here. You have to make a blank layer to do this. You go over to the custom shape area. It might default to shape. Sorry, my voice is starting to crack here. I would pick path. So now you pick the custom shape. You've designated it as path and not a shape. This gets a little bit confusing, but basically you're making a path. So I move this, and now here, this is what they call the path. And you will see that there's a paths. Beside the layer, there's a paths window. So you can see here that I have this path right here. You can actually make other paths. And then I can go pick the ellipse tool here. And then whatever path, this is the first path that I'm on. I made the square. The second path is the circle. So I can actually make different paths inside of the paths window. So where the magic starts happening is if I've selected my path, there's this option down here. If you hover over this, you can see it says stroke path with a brush. So you can then go over to your brush tool. You can pick whatever color you want. Go to the brush, and go up here. You can pick your other brush tips. So you can pick a textured brush tip here. Okay, it's just that. Okay, Photoshop is acting seriously weird. Anyways, I'm on the brush tool, the way that this should work. And then go here and click this. And then you can see that it attaches whatever texture brush I'm on to the path. If I change my mind, I want a different color here. And if I want a different brush tip, then you just change that up and you hit this again. Okay, it didn't change the color on me. What is going on? Jeez. Okay, I honestly have no idea, but you get the point. So if you want to have more fancy looking borders around things and you want that, a good tip is you can go down in here to these shapes, change the shape to a path, go over into the paths, and then you can start clicking this button here and you can start stroking the path with your brush stroke. And that's a lot of students have really enjoyed doing that in the past, right? So, and then there's my layer that everything's attached to. And then you know the drill of like, going to the text tool, picking your text and filling all that in. I just really wanted to highlight a couple graphic options that look really cool for your calendars, and also quick ways of organizing your grid has been helpful in the past.